Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday Fireside Chat again here with Stefan and my partner and friend, Jack. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Stefan. It's great to see you again, sir.
Awesome. Yes. We haven't seen each other physically for, what is it now, 5 months?
I think it was February.
Yeah, February, yeah. So
February. So
well, we're today at the end of July, so last day in July. Thank you for being with us the last couple of weeks, guys, on the calls. We've had a chat about diversity, and we've tried to pull together some discussions with a few of the leading organizations that have done great work. I know for Jack and I, we talked about today's summary, and we said that we both learned a lot. We were exposed to additional information and projects and initiatives that the associations, and we'll mention them in a second, have done. We admire what they've done. Clearly, there's still a lot that can be done, probably will have to be done forever. Jack, what do you think? This is a never-ending, very complicated task.
Yeah, I mean, it's a societal task. It's not, no one anything is going to solve it. It takes everybody who's going to have to do their bit. So it's big. It's big.
It is big. And T3 is just hoping that they can step up and show their commitment to do their part. Jack and I thought it would be appropriate that we maybe try and summarize the 3 discussions which we had. We don't want to repeat them, but we've gone back and re-listened these talks, and Jack and I have separately summarized them as to what we've heard. So I have a few notes here, which I'm not going to necessarily read, but I'm going to go back to them to make sure that we capture them accurately. In no particular order, these are what we heard from the leaders. The first association we spoke to, Jack, if you'll remember, was the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Yes. Those were the African-American friends of ours. Let me see, the highlights I had there, 1 or 2 points which came to mind to me. The president, we had Donnell Williams and Antoine, right? Yes. Donnell said, here's a note, I tried to take his words down. He said that African Americans are about 45 years old when they buy their first home. They're a little late to the home ownership party, right? Because we associate home ownership generally with more kind of a 20s, late 20s, maybe early 30s. And he said that the average African American only gets into home at about 45. And he said they must please learn to buy a house before they buy cars. Right? Because he was thinking
they have a whole campaign on that, which I think is very, like they've said, that's, we want to encourage people to get into home ownership before they buy their car. I think it's very smart.
Mm-hmm. What hit me hard is that he said that discrimination is still very, very, very real today, and it persists. And probably if you're not in one of those minority groups, or even if you're in a different minority group, you experience discrimination or the perception of discrimination or the actual discrimination so totally different. But they were both very vocal that discrimination hurt them as a group, as a race, as a constituents every day. Jack, what do you remember from that?
I think a lot of things we're learning about discrimination right now because of the advent of cell phones and cameras and kind of more awareness. And I think that unless you're experiencing it, it's human. If you're not experiencing it, you don't know that it's going on. You don't think it's going on. And I think is an eye opener for everybody. And then, they've got some great historical information about all different things that have happened in our industry that are related to discrimination in housing. Everything from, them having to form the association because they weren't allowed to be members of the National Association of Realtors, to all the covenants and deed restrictions that were put into, many housing communities throughout the United States through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So there's some, really concrete evidence of that discrimination all the way up to the Newsday study that was released last year, where people were secret shopping and it was apparent, it was on video. So it's there.
Yeah. Important to just mention to everybody, of course, that today all race groups are permitted to join all associations, whether that's the National Association of Realtors or any of the other associations which are more sort of around a race group. But even if it is around the Asian or the Hispanic or the African American, if you are European or of another race group, you are permitted to join. So today there is an open barrier, but that many of those restrictions are still maybe implied or perceived or felt. Sometimes the members say they would go to a different association and they feel that they're, one out of many, and although they are welcome there, they don't feel part of that group and part of that constituents. And I've been in rooms where I'm the minority in a room of truly more than 1,000 people. And it is sometimes daunting. You're not quite sure what to do. You're not sure if you can do certain things because it's outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. I've shared with you, Stefan, I grew up in minority schools. So a lot of my education, K through 12, I was in minority majority schools because I was part of that whole busing system. And so I absolutely have been in that situation, and it can be uncomfortable. And I think that's what we heard from the other side is that, hey, we're always uncomfortable. like we're in a lot of rooms we're not comfortable in. And so, yeah, it's real and it impacts them on a daily basis.
Another great example that National Association of Real Estate Brokers gave us was, I think they gave the example of a piece of lumber being bought from a hardware store going down the street was just the example. And if you turn left into a perceived white neighborhood and you turn right into a perceived black neighborhood, then the perception is that the value of that lumber, so the house being built has a lower value in the one because it is associated or it is implied that it is a different race group. I can see that happening. I'm disappointed that it's happening, but I can see that. I mean, we might not have redlining officially anymore, but we probably have it subconsciously in many areas. What do you think about that?
I think it's a fact. It's a fact. You just look at how many cities are set up and how they've grown and how they've evolved, and you look at the property values. I'm in Austin, Texas, and Austin has had a long history of a racial divide running through the middle of the city, which is IH-35. And you don't have to spend a lot of time looking at property tax records and historical home values to come to that conclusion and say, well, if you have a home, even if it's a really nice home in an area that's just on the other side of the highway, it's a significantly different value. And that's been going on for generations.
The exciting side that came out of the discussion, which I liked a lot, is when they told us that according to their calculations that there's probably about 1.7 million African Americans that have qualified or qualify in terms of the Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae requirements. And these are African Americans that earn six figures, that's 100,000 more, that are theoretically ready to buy property tomorrow. Yeah. And that either they don't understand, don't have the opportunity, don't have the property, don't have the access. There's more than one reason that has limited them to buy. But both you and I said at 1.7 million, that's a quarter of a normal average year of all the market. But if we could help that market and start with that, we would be great.
And I feel that, real estate is an industry that requires we educate the consumer a lot as an industry because they don't transact very often. They don't do it very often. And that to me is like, okay, we've got a population of people that is ready, willing, and able to buy. And we need to put some weight against that and support that because it's better for them. It's great for the industry and it's a win-win.
You just mentioned a word there, which Jack came up 3 times during our discussion with the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and then again, Hispanic Association, then again, the Asian Association. And that was the word educate.
Yes.
They all 3 mentioned that there is a lack of understanding broadly in some of the other cultures. And I know, being an immigrant myself, that there have been things that you sometimes hear which you go like, what did you say? What did you mean? What's the implication? And you might not know a term or a word or a phrase or a sentence. And I think the Asian Association also said to us that for some of the Asian people, the terminology of financing and the different methods of financing complicated and they don't really understand. And therefore, they're sometimes hesitant to do something. And I think Donnell also said that education, communication, super important, super important.
Yeah, it's just to create even the background of understanding what it is to commit to a mortgage, to have a down payment, to do the things that if you've been in, if you're in the industry, that's all you do all day long. You don't give a second thought to it. But we have 1.7 million people that need more background and understand how it will help them in the future, how it will help them build wealth.
Yeah. So let's move on to the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. I really enjoyed the 3 different groups. They were so different. I think after we did the first group, I don't know what I expected or did not expect, but when we spoke to the Hispanic Association and then later to the Asian Association, they were uniquely different. Yes, and that was that. I mean, you really know that. And having traveled, many countries in the world, I already knew that. But you know how you know things and you actually, I don't know, ignore them, forget them, accidentally don't even give them the weight that they deserve. But when we spoke to the Hispanic Association, and we didn't prep for these calls. I mean, I did reach out to these people just to confirm that we were going to have the call, but we didn't prep for these calls. Jack and I really do try to make these calls as natural as we can. And they, out of their blue, just said that our home is our castle. Hispanics love their home. It's their fortress. It's their measurement of success. And I could relate to that. I could see that in their culture. You've also got a lot of exposure to the Hispanic culture.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've grown up in Texas, and so I've had a lot. I mean, my middle school experience and a lot of my elementary experience was there, and my best friend is from Honduras. And so I see that. I mean, it really is. I go over to Carlos's house and spend time with him, his wife and their kids. We take trips together and all that kind of stuff. And they really are reflective of that culture where their home is. I mean, they do so much at their home. It's incredible. And they're a multi-generational household there. They have Carlos's parents are there. And so you can see the culture and how the home really is the center of everything that they're doing.
Yes. The African American Association had told us that their homeownership numbers was sort of in the 40 to 44 percentile range the last couple of years. It's nudging up, so it was good, and that their dream was one day to hopefully get to 50. And then the Latinos told us that 52% of the net home ownership growth in the entire US comes from the Latino population. So you can see the numbers there slightly higher, maybe 10 percentage points or so. It was exciting to hear those growth numbers under the Hispanics.
I think that the demographics in the Hispanic population are so strong as it being one of the places where we're going to see a lot of home ownership growth and engagement in the real estate market come from. I mean, just the numbers. If you just take the numbers, you plug them in an Excel spreadsheet, and you look at what they've done in the past, and you project forward in the future, we're going to have a very large Hispanic homeowner population over the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's already big. It's getting bigger. And so it's an incredibly important demographic for everybody that is in the real estate industry because of that.
What was a great statement which they made is, and maybe the perception is not everywhere, maybe it's only local, which often is the case, but they said, please understand that the majority of Latinos in the US are not immigrants. They're US born, right?
Yeah, they've been here.
They're here. They're as American as, I became a citizen, almost 20 years ago, and I consider myself today American, but I'm an immigrant. So there are people here that may look or speak differently, but they are as American as we all are. And they actually said you don't have to speak Spanish to be able to work with them. And maybe there might be that perception in some cases. Of course, advantageous to speak to somebody in their own vernacular and background, but not a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to cap on that, I mean, there are Hispanic families in Texas, where I'm from, California, where our corporate offices are. They've been there longer than there's been the Republic of Texas or the United States of America has been there. So they've been there a long. I mean, you're absolutely right. They're not a recent immigrant population. They're native to this land. They've been here a long time.
Therefore, absolutely unconditionally, we've got to accept everybody's part of one country, right? One nation. That's what makes America so great. I mean, that's why I wanted to immigrate, because of the American dream. And we spoke to Marissa, you remember Marissa, and Sarah, who's the president, and they both told us that the American dream is alive and well in the Latino community. And that's one of the reasons they like to come to America and to be in America, because this is a place where they can actually own real estate, right? I liked one thing, I think it was Sarah that told us that if you would like to expand your team, I remember we had an inquiry from one of the brokers who said, how do I get more access? And they said that if you'd like to expand your team, think about going to schools where there's a high Latino population or in areas where there are Mexican people, because the younger generation don't know enough about real estate. Again, the word educate came up. We have a task to tell them and explain them more about how real estate works.
Well, they have some great tools. And also on the call, I shared that when we were looking at all their materials, the NAHREP materials around the 10 principles of wealth building and all of that. I think there's some really strong educational material. I went through that and I was like, I'm actually going to sit down with our kids and take them through those materials because I think they're so strong and they really speak to some very fundamental things about home ownership, building wealth, being responsible with your finances, understanding debt, kind of all the things that you need to do in order to really have a good financial life and a healthy life. So it was really refreshing to see that had been so well packaged and put together, and is a great resource for that education.
I'm sure there's not enough resources, but there's probably more resources than I think most of us know. NAHREP also referred to the fact that they have some courses to try and help teach and educate the Latino community about real estate vernacular and terms and language. And they said that they were just partnering with I wrote it down here, the Arizona University to create some online courses about cultural competency. And I know that NAR has a great course at Home with Diversity. So I know there's a number of resources available. Maybe, Jack, maybe we should try and see if we could talk to these associations again, get a list of all of these, talk to NAR, get a list of those, and maybe create some. Remember the stuff which we did when the pandemic broke out and we had the prepare and we had things for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for brokers and associations, MLSs. Maybe we should create pages like this with lots of shortcuts and guidelines for people where they can go get these resources. Because sometimes I think maybe you're lost, you just don't know where to get them.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great idea. And I know the prepare resources for COVID were used extensively. So if we've got, if we've got an audience, let's make sure they know where everything is. And I think there are some really great resources out there, like you said.
Yeah. Something which came up in also more than one discussion, I'm going to mention it here because this is where it came first, but it came up again when we had a discussion with the Asian Association, is role models. My wife, which is a professional person, she's now retired, but I remember that she said when she grew up in South Africa that she was always looking for a female executive or a female leader or a role model that she could associate with, look up to. And she said she never really found one in her life, and there was something lacking. And I sensed the same question from 2 or 3 of these associations. If there could be more examples given to Latinos and Asians and African Americans, and even regular Americans. Don't your kids look up to you as a role model?
I would hope so. It depends. They're turning into teenagers, so we'll see. That changes day to day. But the hope is yes, and I think they're incredibly important. And I know myself personally. I grew up in a single parent household, and so I looked for role models outside of our family unit. I looked for people that I could admire and emulate. And I think that's I think it's critical. I think it's critical. So I really loved what Sarah said about that was part of why she was doing the things she was doing, is she wanted it was important for her own business, for her own self, but also to set an example to others. And I think that was an incredible statement, because I mean, when she went through all the list of all the things she does, it's like, and you're now volunteering your time, and it's incredible. But the role models is super important. It forms something in a young person's mind about what's possible for them and what to strive for. So
didn't Sarah also tell us that she grew up in a military family, so she moved around a lot as well?
She moved around a lot. I was really impressed. I mean, this is a person you can watch out.
Yes, right.
So you put her in front of something, she's going to run it. So
she has her own company today, and she's president of the association. So I think, again, role models. I do say, Jack, I admire you for that. You created a program within T3, and maybe we should see if we can bring a diversity angle into that program. It's not a course about diversity, but you created the T3 Fellows program, in which we do a lot of mentoring. At the moment, it is, predominantly white. Maybe we should see, Jack, what might be a good idea? What if we could come up with an idea to maybe sponsor or donate or subsidize? I don't know. I'm going.
I think it's a really good. Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I think we've done a good job. That program, we've had about 60 brokers go through it. We have had. I will tell you, Stefan, we've had more women broker leaders in that program than men,
Right.
which is great. So I think we've done a good job, or better job there of developing and encouraging women leaders. And we've had some great ones come through that program and do amazing work, like David Davin and Lindsay Dreyer in Washington, D.C., who've Connie Carlson in Atlanta. We've all done great stuff, but I think we haven't had enough. We've had, I think, 2 African-American broker owners participate in the program. I'd love to have more. And I know we've had a few Hispanic participants. We'd love to have more. So I think it's a great sponsorship or some kind of way to on-ramp more people into that would be terrific.
Yeah, it's a way to act as a mentor, as a role model, as a best practices, as a support. Alrighty, let's go on to the third association that we did, which was just last week, the Asian Real Estate Association of America. The most fascinating point that I started off that discussion learning from them is, and again, something I knew, but it's surprising how many things you know in life and you forget, or you don't react upon it, or you sometimes ignore. They reminded us that although we, and this is a broad we, sometimes look at the Asian population as one monolithic big group of people, and we probably associated largely with Chinese, they clearly said to us, watch out guys, we are as much as 51 subgroups and different languages, and we sometimes even at a AREAA board meeting have multiple languages, and we find our common language to be English. Unique.
Yeah, it's a very, and just the differences in, you have South Asians, you have Pacific Islanders, you have Japanese, Chinese, Indian, Thai. I mean, so many different, and those are the large populations. Then they have many that are the smaller Asian subgroups. Just a lot of extensive diversity within that population, as much as we have here in the United States. So it was pretty shocking how diverse they were, and how different. There's a lot of differences between subpopulations. Some of them have more wealth or have been here longer or more established, and some are newer, and just a real story of the immigration story of the United States within the Asian American population there.
And the first Asians also came to America centuries ago, so they've also been here a long time. We had on the call, we had Hope, who's their executive director, and we had Jim or James, who's their current president, who's with Sperry, I believe, up here in California. Jim mentioned something. He said, I wrote it down here when you mentioned those other cities. He said, in some cities in America, you can actually speak Chinese, Korean, Filipino, Vietnamese, and never have a need to speak English, because the communities are so strong and so vibrant and so powerful. We sometimes look down to somebody who doesn't speak English fluently because we just automatically assume, well, everybody should. It's not even necessary. It's not even necessary in some places.
Yeah, and that shows how when you've got enough people together that are all from one culture, that how they're supporting each other, how they have created a rich network to establish themselves in the United States and to then grow and develop a bigger community. So that was fascinating.
Hope, their executive director, said a few things that I jotted down here that I liked very much or was good. Again, she said Asian cultures are credit averse. They like buying things in cash. They give large deposits oftenly, and they often pay things off quickly. Sometimes families even group together to co-sign and to buy cars and homes together. And then James said, and therefore they often have thin credit files.
Yeah, I found this to be the most interesting difference between the Asian Americans and some of the other populations that we talk to, is that they do come from cultures that are credit or debt averse, which makes sense if they're coming from a country where they can't trust the banking system, and they don't, all that kind of thing. And so, they have a disadvantage walking into a conversation with a mortgage broker, and the broker's talking to them about amortization and points and all this kind of stuff. And they not only do they not do that, they just don't have the cultural background for it. So it's an area where, additional help is needed. And then they may not have a credit score, or they may have I know you had that, you talked about it on the call, that you had that challenge when you came here, because all your credit activity was in South Africa. It wasn't here. And so you had to do things to establish your credit score and to do those sorts of activities. And so it's a challenge. It's one of the gaps there.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I am, historically from a European background and lineage, but I lived in Africa for, over 30 years in 2 countries. And so I had enormous exposure to the African-American community for 30 years of my life. And we, meaning even the white population of South Africa, Jack, I've never had a balance on my credit card. I've never not paid my credit card in the same month I got it. It doesn't mind, even if it was a company expense, I would still pay it off. I just didn't want I didn't want to owe anybody any money. I just don't. I don't have a mortgage on my houses these days either. I've paid everything off, not because I'm wealthy or not wealthy. It's just because I'm ashamed to have a mortgage. I'm ashamed to have a loan, right? And I know it's not the American way, but I can so associate when Hope said that. It's just the way we were raised. You never file for bankruptcy. You never owe money. You make good on your word, and you stand together forever. It's just the way it's done. The way we were raised.
That's that is your fiscal responsibility. Is one of the things I most appreciate about you as a business partner and a partner in T3. So that's a very good thing. It's very good.
So at least I fully appreciate that. Hope also gave us, she said, that was interesting. She said that many of the Asians that immigrate to the United States tend to come through gateway cities, as she called them. I thought it was one. I also saw that in their reports, but it was nice when she mentioned it. And then she gave examples of gateway cities. She said, of course, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, Boston, New York, San Diego are obvious ones. And then she said, but there's also, I think it was Jim that said, as many of the Asian communities stay here longer, become more entrenched in the American way of life and society, they tend to sometimes move to more business-friendly cities. They said that the South, and of course they spoke very well of Texas. They specifically mentioned Houston, they mentioned Charlotte, they mentioned Tennessee as places where an increasing number of Asians would like to go to. So that's also good news for realtors in general.
Yeah, those are growth areas. I mean, we know Texas has been a growth part of the market for years and years, and a lot of the South has exactly that same dynamic. A little more business friendly, lower taxes, many of the things that people look for when they're trying to grow their business, their wealth, have a great life, have a great outcome. So very good. I thought the other piece in talking to them too about, we asked them about, do Asian Americans view real estate as a profession? Do they view it as something to go into? And they had a similar answer to the other groups that said, maybe not, or they're not exposed to it, they don't have it. But it was there's such a bias amongst many Asian American, especially the parents that immigrate here. They want their kids to be doctors or lawyers or engineers. They want to go into those because they understand those professions. And so real estate is it's a question mark. They're not sure about it. It's not something that they would necessarily want their kids to go do. And I thought that was again another interesting difference with that particular group, that population.
And again, I can relate. There's a song which was sung by Albert Hammond, Free Electric Band, in which he actually sings, "My parents expected me to become a lawyer, doctor, or a civil engineer." And that's what I was growing up with. I knew I was going to go to university, but I never had 90 degrees as an option because my parents made me feel that those were the 3 options. Take it or leave it, you can pick between the 3. And it does show a high propensity towards, not that they think those professions are better, they feel that those professions are safe. I believe my child will have a good life if they follow a professional career rather than a movie star or a singer or a real estate broker, which is more unknown to those, call it foreign cultures or foreign groups, minority groups.
Yeah, and I think that's an area where there's an opportunity to educate and to show how this is. I mean, it's a fantastic career. We have clients all the time that have done tremendously well choosing real estate as a career. We've picked it. We just ended up on the consulting and research side of it, and it's a fantastic industry. And I think that's where some education can be done with all of these groups and to really help them.
I was speaking to an executive with the National Association of Realtors the other day, and he shared with me that there's approximately 300,000 people of color, non-white, that are members of the National Association of Realtors, which is actually it's not in the same ratio as the population of the country, of course, it should be a high number, but it's actually, I think, a bigger number than most people would expect.
That's a higher number. Yeah, that's a higher number than I would. If you'd asked me flat to just come up with that, I don't think I would have come up with that number. That's higher than I expected.
Yeah, so he said just short of 300,000. And of course, there's a lot of them that don't participate actively in committees and leadership and positions and speaking, and they don't reach the highest spots. So I think we have a double task that we need to try and help with, maybe, Jack, and that is maybe people that are already in the industry, to help them grow into better leaders, higher leaders, give them opportunities, make sure that they have mentors and roles and opportunities. And then also see if we can help maybe increase that number, climb a little bit, and bring more people to the industry. How do you feel as maybe two possible areas which we could focus on as T3?
I think if we can help people who are in the real estate profession be more successful, then they will bring their friends, they will bring their community along. And I think that that's part of, if there's anywhere where we can, it's a huge boulder, it's a huge rock to push on, is this diversity and inclusion thing. It's huge. If there's any part of it we can push on, it's probably that one, to encourage more leaders in that space, to give them support, to help them with the things that we can do and that we know about, because that's our space. That's an area we can actually do something. There's a lot of places I don't think you and I can make any difference in, how credit is allocated in the United States. That's a big, that's a whole thing. There's lots of areas I don't know that we can push on, but that one I think we can.
Yep. And some of the associations, like the ones which we spoke to, National Association of Real Estate Brokers, I remember that Antoine said that they've already had, and they frequently have, disagreements or loggerheads or points that they push on with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae on exactly those issues already. So I think some of those are being addressed by people more capable than we are in those arenas. I'm going to give my closing takeaway, then I'd like to get your closing takeaway, Jack, and then you and I can jointly make a sort of a kind of an announcement. My takeaway of all of these discussions was I was pleasantly delighted when all of them mentioned that amongst their race groups, amongst their population, amongst their minorities, doesn't mind where you come from, the American dream is alive and well. Many of those people, whether they grew up here, were born here, or decided to immigrate here for whatever reason, did so largely because they wanted a better education, they wanted a job or their own business, and they wanted a place where they could raise their family in their own home. And every single one of them said that owning real estate was considered, generally speaking, a positive contribution and a mile marker they wanted to achieve. So I think there is a lot of opportunity in doing the right thing for those people and helping them. At the same time, I think the industry, our industry, which is predominantly more white, will actually help themselves as whole by lifting the economy up. We can sell more real estate, so it can serve two purposes at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's a thing that we can all get behind, is that we have groups of people that don't have the level of home ownership that they probably should, and the gaps for the most part consist of education and communication. In some cases, there's some policy, there's some fiscal work, there's some other things that need to change structurally, but a lot of it is education. A lot of it is advocacy, and those are areas that we can do work on and I think everybody can agree are good, because everybody owning more homes is great for this industry, and it's great for the person that's buying the homes. It is their castle. It's what's most important to them. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Well, thank you, Jack, and I'm sure from your side as well, from both of us. Thank you to the 6 leaders from the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, as well as the Asian Real Estate Association of America. You gave us your employee leader, your appointed leader. You gave us your elected leader. We had 2 executives. We got many viewpoints. We've taken notes. We will convert these into some document, make them available. All of those interviews, if you want to go listen to the specific ones, of course, they were recorded and are available. T3, this is not T3's task per se. There are associations already doing this. NAR is also, of course, one of them, doing great work. But I think it's everybody's responsibility at the same time. And T3 is going to try to do its part by stepping up. Jack and I have committed as partners of the company to allocate a significant chunk of our profit and resources to see how we might be able to work with NAR, any one of these three associations, as well as Jack and I have been working on our own initiative, which we want to gift to the industry. We're not ready to announce it yet. We are still dotting I's and crossing T's, putting it together. It's not going to be known as the T3 initiative. We'll get it off the ground. We'll help fund it, start funding it. We'd like you all to get behind it. We're going to give it its own name, its own brand. We'll put it in a nonprofit. Our goal is simply to create a vehicle that we think can address many of these items that Jack and I have identified after listening to two focus groups, three. And they're not all. I am going to schedule at least another dozen focus groups on and offline in the next month or two to try and learn more. And then we are going to appoint a person, which Jack and I will be announcing on Monday. We have been looking at this. The first time we spoke to this person was just about a year ago. And in the last 2 months, we've been able to reach an agreement. And we are going to make an announcement on Monday with regard to somebody who will be joining the T3 team in a senior capacity to specifically and dedicated drive this initiative. The initiative will have Jack and and the rest of the T3 team, everybody else, Dean and Travis and Michelle and Paul and Jonathan and Mark and Tinas and Chris and Karen and Danielle and Bob. I don't know who I missed there. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Clint. So it's going to carry all of those people's support, but we're going to have somebody who's going to dedicate full-time energy to trying to help do our part. Jack, closing comments from your side?
Yeah, so I think that I read John Lewis's essay this morning that he wrote to be published upon the event of his death. And I think with the passing of John Lewis and Elijah Cummings, two greats of the civil rights movement of the 60s, and in the essay, you could see, he said, I've done my bit, and he's passing the torch to those of us that want a more equal society, a more fair society, and want to have us grow the American dream for everybody. And I feel that I think we can do our part towards that, Stefan. And I'm very excited. As you know, we've talked about this initiative for a couple of years now. I'm very enthusiastic about it, and I'm glad we decided to move it forward and really get it going, because the timing feels very right, and it feels like that we can pick up our piece of the work and do it with the initiative and with the executive that we're bringing on board.
And sometimes a little daunting, because as you said earlier on, the task is too big for any one person. It's too big for a lifetime of people. And there are many people that have been doing and have done great work. And there's been change, but of course there's still a lot to be done. Let's not politicize this in any way whatsoever. We're not trying to make it political. Let's try and stay away from all of the negativity. Let's not encourage anything that is negative. Let's stay within the confines of the 68 Fair Housing Act, and then the act that was passed last year, 2019, the second one, which was important. But let's try and find commonality across all aisles, all paths, all race groups, all colors, all backgrounds, all minorities. And let's see if we can do something together. T3 is going to try and pull it together and see if we can contribute. To all of you guys, from Jack, me, Tinas, the rest of the team, thank you very much for being with us for the month of July for diversity. I'm going to take a hiatus for the month of August, maybe even more if I can talk Jack into it. We have convinced Kelly White as a part of our team. We are going to have a special feature in the month of August. We are going to make it our own version of Women Month, Women Leadership. And Jack and Kelly and I have been looking at who we think would be 4 wonderful women that we can bring on board and have a heart-to-heart about another group that often feels underrepresented, not always perceived correctly, and doesn't get the opportunities that they believe they could get. We'd like to see what we can do in that realm. And Jack, it's going to be you and Kelly to take the torch for me for a month.
We're looking forward to it. We've got some great people that we're lining up to come and talk to us in August. And Kelly and I have been very excited about this over the last couple of weeks. And thank you for taking the break and giving us the space and opportunity to do some of that work. We appreciate it, Stefan. You've done tremendous putting this program since the beginning of COVID together. And I really want to acknowledge that it was your leadership to say, hey, we need to do a fireside chat. We need to get people on. We need to get them talking. And so thank you for kicking it off and giving us a strong example of what to do in a time of crisis and how to engage leaders at the highest level in the conversation. So really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Just thank you, Jack. A quick thank you also to Chris Riley, who you may see his photos on here. He is our marketing director at T3, has also got up at all the awkward hours of the day and the night to record everything, and in many cases also to go and edit it and put it together and try and get it out to you guys, usually within 24, no more than 48 hours. So many times you would get an email from him on Saturday saying, and here's the recording of Friday. So Chris, I know you've been in the background. Thank you. You've also been managing the chat board and putting up the domains many times. If any of you have any ideas for what you think Fireside Friday from T3 should focus on, maybe for the month of September, October, if you think there's a theme that's important, please feel free to email Chris or Jack or myself, and we would love to keep this topical. This is unrehearsed, unprepared, from the bottom of our heart, from us to you. T3 says thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Take care.